great set of information for people to either get familiar with some of those benefits options, or to kind of have a refresher for some people, I'm sure. Some of the questions are specific and a few of them are general. I'm going to go ahead and start with a question about rent assistance being included in benefits. Can you talk a little bit about that for folks?
Sure, you bet. Rent assistance to me means subsidized housing of some kind, and subsidized housing is definitely a public benefit that work incentive counselors advise about and give information about. Some subsidized housing situations are pretty complicated. It depends on the person's unique circumstances, the number of people living in the household, the other income in the household. So the level of advisement that can be provided will differ a little bit from one person to another. But in general, subsidized housing is definitely one of the many public benefits that work incentive counselors can provide advisement on.
That's fantastic. As with any place, I'm sure things are going to vary from location to location, but just broadly, it's great that that there's information out there for people to access so that they can help their customers with these kinds of questions. Another question that we had a pretty specific questions about people living with HIV and how they interact with work earnings. The questions was about state AIDS drug assistance programs and HUD's opportunities for people with AIDS program. The question said, is WIPA's consultation and advisement to people living with HIV who are receiving SSI and or SSDI now informed about these critical programs and their policies related to income changes from work earnings? That's a pretty specific question for our kind of broad webinar today, but do you have any thoughts, Molly, on where people can find more information about this?
Yeah, well, so the housing assistance for people with HIV and AIDS, HAPWA, is a type of subsidized housing program. So it's one of a handful. And so certainly a work incentive counselor, that falls in their scope of work to provide some information and advisement about. Again, sort of depending on the complexity of the person's situation, that may affect how deep the advisement can go. The HIV/AIDS drug assistance program is certainly a benefit, a public benefit program, and one that a work incentive counselor could provide some advisement on as well. That's not one that commonly comes up, I would say, having provided training and technical support to work incentive counselors across the country for a number of years and provided services myself. That falls into the category of one of the less common benefits that we see. Sort of in line with that would be unemployment insurance or workers' compensation. So it's not one that comes up a lot. And I know as a work incentive counselor, when that comes up, I need to dig a bit, help the person find some solid information to move forward with. Right.
And for the person who asked the question, Mark, if you'd like to go to the Project E3 website, www.projecte3.com, there is some specific information about HIV, AIDS, and that population. And because it's one of the communities being pinpointed by the Project E3 study, the study is looking for solutions for some of these more unusual issues, or some of the populations that really haven't been reached or helped yet. So we have several different categories of populations on the website that we're, our demonstration sites are, our intensive technical assistance sites are helping, and one of the populations is people with HIV/AIDS. So I'm not sure if there will be specific answers to your questions there, but we do have quite a number of studies in our research database, and it is one of the populations that is being studied within the Project E3 grant project. So maybe that could give a springboard or help you out a little bit. I hope that helps. And thank you for your question. We received another one, Molly, that says that one of the questioners has heard recently that due to some changes in funding, benefit planners will not be able to meet with clients until they are working. It sounds like this is a rumor that maybe somebody heard. I'm not sure if that's something that you know about.
I can clarify, that, and I tried to get at that a little bit when talking about the WIPA eligibility and who they serve. So WIPA projects have somewhat limited funding, and so in terms of eligibility, the eligibility for WIPA services is actually quite broad. Who is actually eligible for services? Folks within a very broad age range who are receiving public benefits or who are receiving Social Security disability insurance or supplemental security income. But that's such a broad eligibility category that it's just not humanly possible for the funds for a WIPA project to serve everybody in the state who meets that category, that eligibility criteria.
Right.
So Social Security provided some guidance to WIPA projects and essentially said, we feel like it's most important for you to prioritize serving people who are working or actively seeking work, as well as youth. Youth are the third priority group. So if a WIPA project is swamped with referrals, if they have a capacity issue that they're reaching, then they are going to need to prioritize providing services for people who work. So it's not that, technically, it's not that people aren't eligible if they aren't working. It's just a matter of resources. And so those folks who are working or actively seeking work and who are youth are going to get access to services sooner.
Resources comes down to that a lot of the time, doesn't it, Molly?
It does. It does.
Excellent. We do have a few more questions. Somebody is interested in finding out when could we expect the 2019 Red Book to come out, and are they free for state agencies to order? Is that something you would know the answer to?
I do, yeah. I mean, I certainly can't give you a specific date. I feel like every year it's, over the years, I don't feel like it's been a particular month. Like the federal poverty level usually comes out, gets published a certain time of the year. And the Red Book, last year it was really delayed on when it came out. In fact, I don't think it was until the fall that we were able to order actual hard copies of the book. So my guess, I would guess, and I would say that in the next probably month or two, or maybe 3, it should be available online. And you can absolutely order publications for free, paper copies to be sent. You can order actual boxes. If it would be helpful, I can provide a link to the website where it has information about ordering publications.
That would be fantastic, Molly. Is that something you'd be able to put in the chat box, or is it something that we can email out to folks afterwards?
I would say email out. I don't have that saved as a bookmark. At least I don't think I do right now. Yeah.
Okay.
Ah, fabulous.
Oh,
that's it. Oh, that's the poverty guidelines that Rosemary popped in there.
Thank you.
The website for ordering publications from Social Security. I'll get that for you.
Excellent. All right. We do have another question. Do WIPA services allow them to assist beneficiaries who find themselves in an overpayment from work situation? Can a WIPA evaluate and offer suggestions about how to deal with the overpayments?
That's a great question. WIPA projects do have some limitations in terms of the support they can provide around an overpayment. If an overpayment is related to work, the community work incentive coordinators, the CWICs at a WIPA project, their area of expertise is the work incentives. And so what they can do is they can help a person who has a work-related overpayment think through whether there may be some work incentives, maybe that they actually were eligible for, but Social Security didn't know about, and help that person think through whether they should be requesting that those work incentives be applied when the person chooses to appeal that overpayment. And so they can certainly help a person think through how work incentives may be able to reduce, or if in a perfect world, remove an overpayment. CWICs can also explain the level of the appeals, the various steps of the appeals process, and in particular, the first level of the appeals process, and point out the paperwork that needs to be completed. The line is really around representing the person, and so CWIC is not, the funding does not allow for them to provide representation for the person in any kind of level of the appeals process. So certainly information, planning, and some guidance is appropriate and can be provided.
Excellent. Well, that covers all of the questions that we have in the question box right now. So I encourage anybody, I'll leave it open for a minute or two more. If anybody has any questions, but thank you, everybody. These have been great questions. We also like to let folks know that we do record these webinars. They will be available afterwards. We post them on our website, which I just put the web address in the chat box there. So we have a category called webinars, and all of the webinars that we've produced so far will be available on the website for folks to go back and refer to. We also provide the PowerPoints for people, so you can go back and look at the slides as many times as you'd like to, or if there's anything that you wanted to look at in a little bit more depth, those things will all be available for you under the webcasts tab on the Project E3 website. Now, I'm not sure if everyone knows, from the introductory slides, it talks a little bit about the Project E3 grant, and what we're concerned mainly with is helping folks who are in unusual situations or have, as we mentioned before, a specific population who has needs that haven't been addressed yet. For instance, some of the populations that we help are folks who live in rural or remote communities. Sometimes they're eligible for benefits, but they don't always have the supports in place to be able to access their benefits. So what Project E3 is trying to do is to try to help reach as many people as possible and get them the vocational rehabilitation resources and community support resources that they need to be able to take advantage of the VR resources. So we welcome anyone who would like to join our community of practice, to get involved on our website, to point us to different resources that you find helpful. So that's kind of a little pitch for that. But basically, it's for you. It's to help out if you have something in specific that you're dealing with that's maybe a more unusual situation. We encourage people to share on our community of practice. It's always nice to find out what your colleagues in other states or other regions are doing. So that's my quick pitch for that. And I did receive a few more questions, so I think I'll go back to those for right now. One quick question, Molly, it says, are there work incentive staff located in local SSA offices? Is that something you know?
It's a great question. There aren't. You know, what you have in local Social Security offices are service representatives who work at the front desk and are, you know, fielding everything from how do I order a new Social Security card to how do I apply for benefits. And then behind that front desk are claims representatives, and there are claims representatives that oversee SSI claims and those who oversee the Title II disability claims like SSDI. And those claims representatives know the work incentives for each of their individual benefits, but they're really only available for the people, the beneficiaries that are on their caseload. Excuse me. And, you know, I think just in terms of the scheme of things, most people don't just receive a benefit from Social Security. And so while Social Security staff, those claims representatives can answer questions related to the SSI or the SSDI claim, they're not going to be able to answer questions about Medicaid or subsidized housing or SNAP, the newest name for food stamps. So local offices are not a place that you're going to find that holistic sort of work incentive counseling service.
Thank you very much, Molly. We have some pretty involved questions. I'm trying to see if I can summarize some of these a little bit because they are a little bit they are a little bit complicated, and given the nature of the presentation, it is more of a general presentation. So I'm going to throw these out there, and we'll see if there's a way that you can point people in the right direction towards resources that can help them. One question states that beneficiaries sometimes are blocked in progressing from contemplation to action. I'm assuming that means, Mark, that means that folks aren't able to make good decisions about looking for work because they don't have enough information about work incentives and the interactions of work earnings and benefits. He feels that WIPA isn't always available to help people make well-informed decisions. He asks, could this change in the future to encourage more people with disabilities to pursue employment based on well-informed decisions? That's something that is central to some of the work with Project E3. Molly, do you have any advice for Mark or any direction you could point him in?
Well, I think, the fact that there's this recognition that work incentive planning services are a critical part of the vocational rehabilitation process is wonderful. And I think that the funding to support that is not quite caught up with the recognition of the need for it, right. I would say. When I started working in this field as a job developer back in the late 90s, in terms of trying to provide this service, all of the case managers and peer counselors I went to said, why would we need this service? We just tell people don't earn over $500. So it's so fantastic that there's now a recognition that this service can help somebody make a really great informed choice to work. I would say the challenge right now is that the resources haven't quite caught up to it. So I would encourage, as I tried to get at a little bit in the presentation, I would encourage you to look around to see if your state if there's any entities in your state that have taken some efforts to build capacity, if the state VR agency is now helping to fund the service in some way, shape, or form, whether it's employees in the agency or contracting out fee for service or to an agency. And also, we really are seeing more and more Medicaid agencies building this in as a service that the Medicaid vendors, in particular those providing employment services, can include as a part of their billable services. So I would encourage you to begin to ask around about whether there's other providers that have more capacity to provide services.
Thanks, Molly, for addressing that one. We have another question, and it seems to be somewhat related. The person is asking or stating that they have agencies marketing services in their area for contract with DVR. There's a question about clients who want some general information and not necessarily being enrolled with DVR. What their question is, since DVR charges, this person has $800 for private pay for benefits analysis if they're not enrolled in DVR. Does the WIPA worker do a full benefits analysis, or is it just basic info? She's concerned about sometimes the time it takes to get assigned to a DVR counselor and get someone to connect with them. And that seems to be a common theme that has been brought up in a few of our other webinars too. Sometimes it takes a lot of time for people to be seen. Do you have any an answer to that? If does the WIPA worker do a full benefits analysis? Do you know if that's something that they do, or?
I would say what's a little tricky for me in terms of answering this question is that there are some differences from one VR agency to another in terms of how they have set up the service, how the service is designed, and how it will be paid. And so in some states, the VR agency is setting up a service, the work incentive counseling service, to provide more of a tiered approach to delivering services. And in other states, it's there's sort of just one set of service. So I think that the answer to that question comes to sort of what the state VR agency has decided in terms of how the service is designed. the WIPA projects have a specific way that they provide services that's directed by Social Security, the funder. And so in terms of how services are delivered, it's often directed by the funder. And so if folks have, any issues that they see with, the way services are provided and they feel like there can be more efficiencies, it really means, checking in with, if you're working, the person you're working with as a VR counselor, passing along the need for, maybe service could be designed in a different way, but that would need to kind of move up the chain to those who make decisions within the agency for how services are defined. Does that make
Great.
sense?
Oh, thanks, Molly. We've got about 3 minutes to the end of our session. I'd like to have Jen on our staff talk about the evaluations and the CRC credits for those of you that are interested in that. So Jen, please.
Sure. I just want to let you all know that an email is going out tomorrow to everyone that registered with information on how to access the archived version of this webcast, as well as the evaluation. You will be able to request the CRC through the evaluation. And that's it.
Thanks, Jen. And thanks everybody for attending. If you found this a particularly informative session, which I believe it was, we are going to have a series of 6 sessions by Lucy Miller, who is a colleague of Molly's at VCU. She's going to be offering, again, a series of 6 sessions that will get more in-depth on the topics that Molly discussed today. So if you're interested, if you got a notice about this webinar, you'll get a notice about those. But if you would like to take a look at the topics again, go to our Project E3 site, click on webcast, and upcoming webcasts will be listed. You'll be able to look and see what topics Molly will be covering starting April 28th and then for 5 sessions after that. So thanks again for your time, and I will bring this meeting to a close. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.